I would like to relate to some of the papers that were presented before me, not to say anything against them, but to use them for my speech. The first thing is very, very technical, and it has to do with your paper. Did you notice that the problems of speaking here, trying to work with the mouse on, and looking at the screen over there? And what's the problem? Why is that created? The problem is that engineers think about the object and not about the person. If they'll think about the person, I sit here. I would like to have a screen over here so I can play and look at the screen while I talk. I don't talk to this screen. I talk to you. So if there is anything in front of me, that will be very, very helpful. And in some places they provide it, but it's a new thing. Donald Norman, who is a psychologist from Evanston, from the States, he's like an artist of noticing these things. And he made this distinction between engineers that are people-oriented or object-oriented. And what's interesting about what he says is that engineering in general, companies that work on production, startup companies, they start with engineers. Later on, when they develop and they get into the market, they introduce salespeople. And the difference between engineers and salespeople is that engineers don't think about the people. They want to produce the best object. They're object-oriented. They want to make it that it will work well. They don't think about the person who is going to use them. But the salespeople, they don't care so much about the object. They care about how people will receive them, how they'll use them. What are the features that interest the market? Not exactly what will be more useful, just thinking about the object itself. And he claims, Donald Norman, that the difference between a premature and a mature product is how much human element is already in the object. The same thing happened, I think, to economy. I'm not an economist. I'm a philosopher. And I enjoyed very much the speeches that were before me that show, I think, a big development in economy, that the interest on people, on psychology, on the way people receive economic processes, rather than numbers and figures and statistics, because things have changed. And I think that you know, when you compare economy with philosophy, philosophy is an ancient discipline. Economy, like other social sciences, are young. They're from the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century. The development is when things become people-oriented. They are not, statistics is not the main part of the discipline. And here I want to get into my paper. I spoke in the past already in JIMS on what I compared the problem, or what I thought that the tension between the sanctity of private property and the idea of charity in Judaism. Because many important figures in Judaism, some that I respect very much, spoke for what is called distributive justice in Judaism. And there is a very, very important rabbi that lived passed away in Germany in the beginning of the 60s of the 20th century, said that Judaism is not like the Roman idea of private property, where private property was sanctified. In Judaism, we believe in distributive justice. Those things boiled my blood, and I wrote a paper against it, two papers, really. One that expressed the idea of why private property is important in Jewish thought and in Jewish law, and at the same time to redefine the idea of charity, because, of course, charity is a very, very important value in Judaism. What I want to devote my time today is to compare charity with what I call generosity. So, because my English is not, it's difficult for me to express myself this well, so I ask your forgiveness, but I'll read from my paper. This paper was triggered by a book I read recently by John Mueller. I don't know if you heard about him. It's called Redeeming Economics. He's a Catholic, and of course he believes in distributive justice, as I'm going to show you soon. Mueller's work is a very intelligent attempt to reinsert distributive justice into economic thought, and is therefore, of course, also an attack on Adam Smith. Mueller argues that Western economic thought has undergone two major revolutions. The first was the result of Thomas Aquinas' work, while the second was inaugurated by Adam Smith. Aquinas' theory, very simply put, grows out of synthesis of Aristotle's theory of distributive justice with St. Augustine's moral idea of distribution. On Aquinas' description, the market consists of four elements: production, exchange, distribution, and consumption, or use in his language. Distribution, however, serves not only egoistic purposes, or what he calls non-toism, such as selling and buying, but includes gift-giving as well. And for Mueller, the idea of gift is something that is lacking in Adam Smith's thought. In what he calls the divine economy, gift is a very, very important idea. And what I'm trying to do is to argue against it. Again, not to go against charity, not to go against gift, but to try to put it in proportions to show that why it's not really part of the market. Adam Smith is best known for his analysis of the market as a self-correcting mechanism. His theory of pure economics has no use for charity, so says Mueller. Even distribution, since it no longer answers to a notion distributive justice, ceased to carry the weight it had in Augustine and in Aquinas' theories. The two elements that Adam Smith is left with are production and exchange. I'm not going to go through Smith's theory again here, but I should just say now that Smith's machine for growth has no room for giving. Now, the idea of an economic, I understand that, Russ, you disagree with his analysis, right? No, I'm quoting him, but...
I understand. Carry on.
Now, the idea of an economic machine based on aggregate or individual self-interest had already been introduced before Smith in Burton Mandeville's work, the fable of the bees, the private vices, public and benefits. But there are important differences between Smith and Mandeville. I think I'll skip that. Okay. Both believe that the sum of self-interest actions by individuals could contribute to the public good. What set Mandeville apart from Smith was his account of what ultimately drove those actions, in a word, vice, and hence also his account of the public good. Smith believed in a virtuous self-interest which results in a visible cooperation. For the most part, he saw no need to guide or educate individuals in order to secure the public good. Mandeville, on the other hand, believed that vicious greed could lead to a visible cooperation, but only if properly channeled. So, just in a nutshell, for Adam Smith, there is no room for regulation, and for Mandeville there is. But the main idea that there is, if you call it an invisible hand, or these sort of powers of greed or competition that exist within society, can work independently. For both Mandeville and Smith, the market functions like an ecosystem, as an ecological sphere in which all its components develop symbiotic relationship to one another. If we place them among the various theories of ecologic do-gooders, Smith is the deep ecology fanatic, and Al Gore, the Al Gore of economics, just as for ecological zealots, the earth will have been a wonderful place if not for the involvement of man and his intelligence. So too for Smith, the market would have been a wonderful and prosperous place were it not to the involvement of regulating body. And again, this is, I'm speaking from the mouth of Muller. From a religious point of view, such a position smacks of pantheism. No wonder that for Muller, Smith's theory suffers from its secularity, or rather from its pantheism. And again, Ross, you will disagree with it completely. Correct. I'll skip my writing here, but what Muller suggests is that if you'll not insert giving as part of what the market is doing, you lack this divine element. If a person cannot do, he doesn't try to introduce a regulating body, but he says if you don't introduce good values like giving, like charity, if it's not part, if there is no distributive justice within the market, if the market is not doesn't redefine itself by giving charity, then he is like the Al Gore of economics, and it's no good, no use. It's secular, and for a Catholic, it's very difficult to digest. And I, as a religious Jew, for me, if I'll take Muller's analysis simply, it will be difficult for me to disagree with him. I mean, what will I do? Do I want a world without God? Now, Ross, the solution that you gave before, I think, is wonderful. But I want to insert into the picture another element that I think does not. We don't need to talk about redistribution. We can take charity on the side without being in the market, and I'll explain soon why. And I want to introduce an element which is in the market, and I call it generosity. And I'll tell you first what I'm talking about. A while ago, I had a student an American who lived here for a while and then went back to the States. He had zero capital to work with. And he told me that he's going to get into business. So I asked him, how are you going to do it? You don't have a wealthy father, you don't have wealthy friends, what are you going to do? So he told me something that really intrigued me. He told me, this is not Israel. In America, when you want to start a business, you are a young fellow wanting to start a business, though you always can find an older person who is looking for younger, fresh ideas, and he'll give you some capital to work with. He will invest on you. Unfortunately, this was very foreign to me. Not that it doesn't exist in Israel, but it doesn't exist as much as in America. America, people look for the reasons for prosperity in America, and people always talk about the fact that it's a very free market. I think that in addition to being a free market, America is a very generous society. It's not only there are so many donations given to all kinds of purposes in American society, but there is something genuinely generous within American society, as we say in Hebrew, lefargen, right? When people talk about competition, American market is not this competitive. It's competitive when you want to go forward. It can forgive young people for mistakes, but it's generous enough to help people to come in. It doesn't say, well, I'm in, I'm not letting anybody come to compete with me. There is an idea of we want for the good of the society, and we want to let people into the game. What I'm suggesting is that when people think about helping others, they only think about charity, only giving money to people that are of needy people. But when you are in the market, when you are in business, then you act as a shark. And my suggestion is, within the market, act in giving. Giving is not giving money as a present, but investing. Being generous to your neighbor, meaning, and this is very much in agreement with what you said, that I think charity, many times when people give charity, they do it for their own, to feel good. When they're generous and invite someone into the business world, they didn't give a donation. It's not a donation. They'll get back interest. They'll get back some they'll have another businessman to work with. They don't feel like they gave something. It will all come back. They'll benefit from it. But my claim is that this is a good market. It's a good society who is of giving society. Judaism, like Christianity, emphasizes charity and generosity. The Bible saying, you must love your neighbor as you love yourself, is the ultimate expression of the responsibility that one bears towards his fellow man. There is nevertheless a danger of misunderstanding this love as a negation of the self in favor of the neighbor. Jewish commentators have thus emphasized the words "as yourself" to make the point that the love towards one's neighbor should not exceed the love that one bears for oneself. Are these commentators, in effect, praising the relationship between two egoists? For careful analysis of Jewish perception of the ethical relationship between neighbors, we ought to explore two biblical commandments expressed in the phrase, love your neighbor, and let your brother live alongside you. There are few translations. I chose the modern JPS. Anyway, the two phrases are interpreted in a similar fashion, and in both cases, traditional Jewish commentary focuses on the mutuality of the relationship. Love your neighbor as yourself. Your brother may live with you, which means as long as you live, you can help your neighbor. You can't help a neighbor if you give yourself, so to speak. There is always a you present against which to compare your love for your neighbor. That is why it was decided that concern for the neighbor's livelihood shouldn't come at the detriment of one's own. But let's consider the commentary more closely in both cases. I don't know how much time I'll have to do all this analysis, but I'll just say it in short. You know, there is a very known phrase in the Talmud about two people going on the desert, and they have a canteen of water that will suffice only one. There's one opinion that says that they should both drink the water and die, rather than one drink and the other die. And Rabbi Akiva, famous Rabbi Akiva, says no. It says, "V'chei achicha imach," you should live alongside with your neighbor. And it's only if you live that you stay alive, that you can love your neighbor and you can help the livelihood of your neighbor. But otherwise, you should drink, and the one that owns the water should drink, and the other person will therefore die. Which means helping is only when it starts with the love of yourself. It sounds like egoism, but it's not. This is in a way not to give your cheek to your neighbor. The reception of this idea, of these two phrases, is the first of the word kamocha, like as you love yourself, and in the other with the word imach, alongside you, straighten the idea of that for the Torah, at least according to the majority opinions of the sages, ethical obligations toward the neighbor are qualified by the precedence of one's own needs and self. One must note that the consideration for one's own needs need not entail egoism or of any sort. It is not an ethical egoism the Jewish law professes. Rather, it is the altruism qualified by egoism. And this is the altruism that you asked me if is there in my story. The assumption the assumption is that the needs of the self shouldn't be ignored because they are ignored. Because if they are, ignore underside consequences may follow. Jewish law does not advocate self-interest as much. Indeed, the case is more nearly the opposite. A person who cares only for his self-interest is compared to an idol worshipper, say the rabbis. But neither does Jewish law believe in a pure or absolute form of altruism. A measure of self-interest is necessary to maintain a healthy altruism. Now, I want to step into the market. As I've mentioned above, Adam Smith's theory, at least according to Muller, is best described as an analysis of market as a self-correcting mechanism, where many egoist forces compete against each other and at the same time drive the machine forward. In this machine, there is no need for or room for altruism. Again, I'm sorry, Ross. Charity, which is in an act of altruism, is thus an act beyond the bounds of the market. Of course, some conscious economists will claim that charity, with its beneficial effects of the happiness, I must say that I got it from you, Robert, givers and receivers, enhances prosperity as well. But it is not, I believe, a direct influence. In fact, according to this analysis, it's a self-interest and not the altruism of the people involved with this charity, both the giving and the receiving parties that helps create prosperity. By contrast, generosity, as I propose, we understand it is an act of altruism that is internal to the market, is thus contributes to prosperity in a direct way. When people care about others, they actually care about their community. And here I get closer to you, Russ. I'm sorry, I'm relating to you all the time. When they help others in the business world, or extend their hand to a person who wants to succeed, they do their part to help a whole community. And I think that there should be an idea of a whole for such altruism to come true. The Talmud expresses great admiration for this type of ethical behavior. And I'll not quote it, I'll just tell the story. There is a case where Alexander there are some legends about him coming to Israel, to the land of Israel, and he saw a very old man planting a tree that the tree will bear fruits many years later. And the king asked him, "For whom are you planting this tree? Who will get? I mean, you'll never gain to eat from this tree." So he said, "Like my parents or people before me planted trees, and I was able to benefit from them. That's how my children will benefit from my tree." And the rabbis connected to the idea of tikkun olam that was quoted before by Ross. And I think that this is an idea that should be, it's a value that should be within society, that expects that things will pass on later. So I think Ross, that it's this idea of that there is God in the world that rules it all, and there is this idea of feedback look that you quoted before, is extremely helpful to get the idea of a community. But I think that there should be we should express an idea of value as well within this system, and then you have a tool to work with. I want to add one little thing that I didn't prepare before. But I have a friend who loves cats. And she's one of these cat feeders in Jerusalem who goes, and everybody's upset with her. You know, there are 30 cats around her house that she feeds every morning and afternoon. Not only that, when they're sick, she gets them to the vet. She really takes care of them. And I have another friend who was the head of the Chevra Le'Haganat HaTeva, the Committee for Preserving Nature, I think it's called in English. And he's mad at these sort of people. He told me, cats are the biggest enemies of our environment. They eat anything. They're predators. They eat everything around them. I mean, you help the cats, you destroy little birds, you destroy many little species. I mean, it's not a good idea. And so he says, who will tell these people to stop to kill these cats? But the thing is, in nature, if you eliminate this kind of good behavior, like this, my other friend who feeds the cats, it's true that for the whole ecosystem, it's not good. But she has a good heart. She wants to give it. She likes cats. Why can't we take this altruistic motivation into account? Fine, so we won't have other animals around, but there are people that love cats. Take them into consideration as well. So I'm not saying I'm not doing that, and I agree with the guy that says that it's not good to feed cats. But I think we should be at least tolerant to people that like animals in this sense, even if it's not good for their environment. Maimonides says, he grades idea of generosity or charity in eight grades. And charity is among them, but it's one of the bottom of the list. The first obligation is to invest in a friend, that to ensure that he will not become poor, that he will not become needy. So my claim is that we have to enhance these parts of that are within the market that can help people to get in, to invite them in. That this value, we should understand that it's not only a charity organization who helps needy people, but it should be an institution within our society that will help prosperity. We shouldn't think of the market only from the point of view of an automatic mechanism who feeds itself, but we should feed this market all the time with values like investment, like generosity. This was my paper, this was my talk.